Welcome back. All right. So, some news of the day for your Friday, February the 10th. And we're going to start off talking about a non NHL story, although it involves an NHL prospect. Zachary Leroux, drafted 27th overall in 2021. He's building himself up quite the reputation, and it's not a great one. So, what happened was that the QMJHL came out and said, well, we can't suspend the guy. So what happens is Leroux, coming off of the ice after the Halifax Mooseheads lose to the Olympique, gets into it with the fans of Gatineau and put his stick through. There's a separation between the glass as you're coming off the ice and the glass here, and he gets the stick through there and apparently speared a fan. 16-year-old fan is what it says, and can't be doing that. But the QMJHL said, well, there's no footage. Well, now there is. There's video of the incident which has surfaced. It's circulating around the Twitter sphere right now, and it's going to put the QMJHL in a tough position because it's clearly a player putting his stick through the glass to try to engage with the fans, and not in a fun way, not in a would you like my stick way, rather would you like my stick in your. Anyways, this is a situation that not only this is where it gets interesting because I think the QMJHL has to do something about this, but I think the Preds kind of have to say something to him and have to say something to Halifax as well. This is a situation where it's a player who does have a reputation for high sticking, in that he's been suspended 8 times in the last 27 months by the QMJHL. Yeah, so really it should have been a position of, look, until we find out he didn't do it, we're going to have to assume he kind of did, but they didn't. So 3 times he's been suspended for high sticking. So, I look at this and I think to myself, this could prevent him from making it to the National Hockey League. You don't want a guy up here who's going to be causing trouble and potentially injuring players, or putting his own teammates in a bad situation where he does something dumb during a game and then it leaves his teammates as targets because he's already kicked out of the game for what he did. So it'll be interesting to see if the league revisits this now that there's video footage of the incident, and clearly it's happened. The fan that was struck has already been contacted by the Olympique, making sure that everything's okay. Nobody was injured on the play. And I don't mean to say on the play because I would insinuate it was during the game. It was after the game. Nobody was injured during this incident. But the funny part is the league came out and said, well, because we don't have any unbiased witnesses. So in other words, if you're an Olympique fan, they don't want to hear from you. They'd like to hear from a Halifax fan. It's weird how that's handled. To me, that's really weird. Yeah, we got people saying they saw it happen, but they're not biased. So why would they make it up? Why would a group of people just make it up? Anyways, yeah, and I'm sure the stories matched up. So it has me asking some questions about the QMJHL and how they handle this as well. Again, especially when it's a player who's been suspended 8 times. 2 times for unsportsmanlike conduct, 3 times for high sticks. So, again, we'll see what happens from here. And I would imagine Nashville's probably reached out to. Because you want to make sure that prospects are being developed properly. And if you're dealing with a guy who's got kind of a short fuse, you want to make sure that the team that's keeping things under control is keeping things under control. So we'll see what happens here. And if the QMJHL turns around and goes, oh, now that we've got the video, now we're going to suspend them. You can't have players attacking fans like that. You can't. It's not the 70s. It's not Mike Milbury with a shoe here. It is now 2023, and you just can't have that anymore. So moving on to National Hockey League news. Jordan Harris has signed a 2-year extension with the Montreal Canadiens that kicks in this fall. And it's $1.4 million per season. Harris has been good. And honestly, the blue line for Montreal, there's a lot of promise there. A lot of inexperience at times as well, of course. There's been a lot made of the inexperience on that blue line at certain points in the season, but I think Harris has been good, and I think that's a solid signing. Patrick Kane has come out today. Kane's sad. This is well, not, I don't know if sad's the right word. Disappointed, I guess. I find this weird. So it was shortly before I went on vacation that, yeah, Kane hasn't made up his mind. Kane publicly has not made up his mind on whether or not he's going to leave Chicago, and there's some debate about whether or not he's going to stay. Like Taves is gone. Taves basically, yeah, he's going to be out. There isn't really any indication that he wants to stick around. But Kane has been kind of hemming and hawing. Well, yesterday the New York Rangers quote and give Vlad Tarasenko, and Kane admits And he's kind of sad that the New York Rangers picked up Vlad Tarasenko because he looked at the Rangers as potentially an attractive place to go. Well, then tell people. Then declare that's what you want to do and that's where you want to go. Like, he's in control of this process. So at this point, the fact the Rangers added Tarasenko, there are a few reasons they may have. They may have felt like he was a better fit. One thing that Darren Dreger's reporting is there are teams that are concerned that Patrick Kane has a hip issue. He's been playing through a hip issue all year, and which would explain his numbers being down. I still say his numbers are down too because, I mean, if you're going to key on a Chicago Blackhawk, it's going to be Patrick Kane. And so that's going to suppress his totals. I think his totals will get better elsewhere. But if this hip issue is seen as potentially being an issue going forward, and he's 34 years of age, then that might ward a team like the New York Rangers off. They can't afford to pick a guy up and then have him end up sitting out during the playoffs because his hip gets worse. Now, when asked about this, Patrick Kane has said that the hip issue is overblown. He's playing through an injury, sure, but it's not that bad. And so this is one of those things where if he would declare, then a team before acquiring him could have him go through a physical. We've seen that before where a team will say, okay, we'll pick up that player, but we want to make sure he's going to be okay. We want to make sure that there's no nasty surprises from a medical standpoint awaiting us when we acquire said player. So Kane could submit to having a physical done and having, a checkup done to make sure that his hip is okay prior to the trade. But we'll see what happens with Kane because now that he's off the Rangers list, potentially, I don't know how. Even with the 50% retention on Tarasenko, I don't see how they can add Kane, even if it was a 50% retention by Chicago on Kane. I don't know that you can necessarily do that. But I wouldn't rule out the Rangers going all in. Chris Drury just saying, you know what, we're all in, we're going to do this. So we'll circle back with Kane, I would think, over the next couple weeks and see whether or not he leaves or if he stays in Chicago past the deadline. I think that would be awful for Chicago going forward. I think they can get a lot for Kane. I think they'll get more for Kane than they will for Taves, but it's under his control. Ian Cole was fined $5,000 for kneeing on Cogliano. Now, last night I didn't think that it was necessarily premeditated, but to me, if you're going to fine him, that means you're seeing some level of premeditation. There was no penalty on the play. Cogliano did return to the game after that, but I think you have to suspend a guy for kneeing. And the reason I'm saying that is simple. You can shatter a guy's knee. You can end a guy's career. Kneeing, if you deem that it's dangerous enough to warrant a fine, I kind of think you have to throw a suspension there because I've talked about this at other times. There have been certain points over the last few years that kneeing seems to be going back up, and it is such a dangerous play. You can ruin a guy's career. So, yes, headshots need to be policed as well, but these knee on knees are way more dangerous than they may look in real time. And they're, again, if they're going to say that Cole threw that knee on Cogliano on purpose, then you kind of have to throw a suspension. That's just me. You guys can let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, but I think there are certain offenses that should just mean it's a suspension. And I think with headshots as well as with knee on knee, it should be a suspension. No tolerance for that because it can destroy someone's career, right? So waiver news, Hayek ends up clearing for the Rangers from yesterday. Kiefer Bellows is on waivers for Philadelphia. It doesn't bode well for Kiefer Bellows that a team like Philly that desperately needs goals has decided that Bellows doesn't have that potential and they're willing to lose him for nothing. I think Bellows probably clears. His offense has not been there for Philadelphia. It's possible the Islanders reclaim him and then put him in the minors, but I'd be very surprised if that was the case. I think that for Bellows, he probably ends up playing with the Phantoms. I think he probably clears waivers, and then it's about getting his game back at that point. But it's too bad with Kiefer Bellows because the offensive potential has been there. It just hasn't been realized. So Philadelphia waiving him at this point. And I have to say with Minnesota, I'm going to close out with this. The frustration just from fans, from media, from everybody with Minnesota right now. It's the highest I've been seen with the Minnesota Wild in some time. I think people realize that this is a team that on paper should be a contender. This is a team that on paper looks pretty darn good. They had the rough patch going into the break, but again, if you lose to Tampa, Carolina, Florida, if you struggle with that road trip, everybody does. But man, it's had this lingering effect. And last night's game against Vegas, it just never really looked like they were in it. It just never really looked like Minnesota was in it. And once Vegas had a couple goals of a lead there, they had that cushion. There was never really any belief. At least I didn't believe that Minnesota was going to come back in that one. And it's, of course, tough because in that market, you're dealing with that disappointment of the Vikings having a really good season, and then that falls apart. And now you got the Minnesota Wild, who seem to be doing their best to fall out of the playoffs altogether. They're currently the number 2 wild card, but it is a tenuous spot that they have. It's a really tenuous grip they have on that final playoff spot. And they're not playing like a team right now that has a lot of confidence. There's not a lot of cohesion amongst the lines. Putting together multiple passes last night was a challenge at points. And so the frustration's definitely building in Minnesota, and I wonder if this means they're more or less likely to make a deal. I know everybody's going to trade Matt Dumba. The problem for Matt Dumba is he's already been a healthy scratch recently, and his play hasn't warranted the amount of pay that he makes. So if a team's going to look at taking on Dumba, I don't know that Minnesota gets very much back, if much of anything. And yeah, the frustration in Minnesota, I don't think trading one guy out is going to make that big of a difference. For Dean Evison, he's tried reuniting old lines. He has tried new combinations as well. He hasn't been shy about playing the younger players, but it's been kind of a mess, and it just feels like it's continuing to roll in the wrong direction for Minnesota at a time where Nashville could jump up and get that playoff spot. Calgary could get it together. Colorado is already technically ahead of them right now. Colorado has that third spot in the division. We know Colorado is going to get better. And so for Minnesota, the math gets a little dodgy in terms of them being able to make the playoffs. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. If you're a Minnesota fan, do you still feel like this is going to be a playoff team? They're going to get through this? Or is this losing streak that just continues, is this a sign of some other problems with the team? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. As always, don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.